CGTN's Africa Senior Editor joined a panel discussion on Switch TV's debut of a new talk show called The Tipping Point. During the show, Douglas Okwatch spoke about China's latest efforts in fighting the novel coronavirus outbreak. And in the conversation with anchors and other guests, Douglas Okwatch also shared views on Africa's readiness to prevent the spread of the outbreak on the continent. Interestingly, the discussion turned into a heated debate. Have a listen.
We need to begin looking at the post-coronavirus situation.
Yes.
Because we, like I already stated, and like many other people are saying, is that now we are beginning to see the whole situation regressing. It's getting lower. So Egypt Air will be going. There are calls on Kenya Airways to resume flights. We all know that Ethiopian Airlines did not stop flying to China. In fact, they continued flying to those five destinations. And China itself is doing a lot to kickstart the economy, because, you know, when we are talking about is Kenya ready, for example, the key questions we should be asking ourselves is, why are we not ready? And why does China have the capacity to deal with the disease? For example, all entry points to the country now have the ability, have the equipment to screen, so that we do not have cases of people walking in either through the airport or other ports of entry into the country without being screened. So that at least gives us confidence and a peace of mind that we are safe up to that point. One of the things that we need to reflect on is that a situation like this is an opportunity for a lot of myths, a lot of fake news, a lot of disinformation, particularly in the age of social media. So some of these myths, some of this disinformation, some of these statements that are not factual are actually going around in social media. And what this is doing is creating fear and panic. So I think information, particularly us as media people, should only be sourced from credible sources. Let's get information from credible sources. Let's corroborate that information. Let's verify that information before we disseminate it.
Now, because you have allowed me to make a statement, I will not go to the nitty-gritties, but I want to agree with Douglas and what you guys are saying and the caller. But I read the geopolitics of war and trade war in the issue of the coronavirus in China. The geopolitics of war. And first of all, I want to advise the Chinese, I hope this will get to them, to stop eating anything that moves. You cannot eat anything that moves, including rats and everything, and you expect not to get these things.
Do you think as Africans we've been made to think they're eating these things that, you know sometimes the evidence and the fact to show that they've been eating this thing, do you think is out here? Or
if you
we are
visit
surviving
China,
with stereotypes and myths?
if you visit China, if you pay a visit to China, you'll be served in a Chinese restaurant some snake soups. You'll be served something like rat soup.
So it's your public service announcement to China to stop eating anything that moves.
Excuse me, if you may allow me to jump in there, I think you started off very well with the geopolitics.
That's why I was headed there.
And for me, the geopolitics lies more in trade wars.
That's what I wanted to address.
And I think what we see happening in the US at the moment is a country that is slowly extricating himself from the rest of the global world. What we see happening in Europe, particularly with Britain and Brexit, is a country that is trying to pull out of a common bloc from other countries. So what Africa in general is faced with is a situation of isolation. So Africa at this point in time should also find out who its true friends are. Our true friends, we know where they are.
The Chinese.
China are among our true friends.
I don't think they are our true friends, but we should not get into that discussion.
I think one of the countries that has intervened in Africa, look at the Ebola situation. Which country risked, which country made sacrifices to help Africa? I think it was China. Which other country did that other than China? That is why, you know, in times of difficulties like this, you know your true friends and you know those that are not your true friends.
Maybe I know he's from CGTN. So I know.
So he could be pro socialism and communism.
It's okay. But again, you see, let's go back to the evidence whereby these guys are eating anything that moves. You know, that's a damning report. But still, we're in African society. Stereotypes and so many things we believe in.
Do you know why I'm saying that? And the reason why I mentioned geopolitics of war. Today, we are having Chinese export to us fake fish that we are eating and flooding and killing the plastic is rice. But fish that is coming from China is basically being brewed along as it is coming from the shoreline to Mombasa. It is killing the local industry in Lake Victoria and wherever we are bringing fish.
I think instead of focusing on sideshows, on issues that are not very useful, I think we need to focus more on our state of preparedness. And I think the African Union and its Agenda 2063, has got all that laid out. For example, there's a plan for Africa's own CDCs. You know, surveillance is a key thing in dealing with epidemics like this. It's about pinpointing and telling that an epidemic is on the way so that it doesn't surprise you. Now, if that epidemic does happen, the second step and the importance of surveillance is making sure that we are prepared. Okay, now that it has broken out, how do we deal with it? Where are the resources? Where are the personnel? What do we need? Who can help us?
Manpower.
So I think those are the issues we need to focus on. And there are a lot of lessons that we can learn from China, looking at how they have dealt with the coronavirus, that we can also emulate.
Yes,
Africa.
Briefly before you wind up.
Let me just get the last word in this way that I want to agree with Douglas. And maybe it is time as a country we start moving into terms of percentages, spending in percentages in every sector in our country. If it's about education, we set aside maybe 20% of the budget. If it's health, we say it is a particular percentage. So that the budget progressively increases in terms of percentage in each and every sector. So that if there is spending needs to be done, it must be spent in the right way, to the right reasons, or to the right purposes. And as I was talking about the state of preparedness, we need just to in every crisis, there is a silver lining. We need to learn something from that.
Well, Beatrice, that was indeed a very heated debate there on
Very
Switch
heated
TV.
indeed, yeah.
And it seems that what it raises for me is the amount of speculation that seems to be circling around coronavirus, whether it's about what Chinese people eat or whether it's about the validity of the statistics or information coming from China. How, in your view, do you think China has handled this question of misinformation during this outbreak?
So this is what we've been discussing over the last few weeks, is the growth of the digital media and how everybody is some sort of reporter in their own right, you know. There's a lot of, by the time information gets to point A and point B, particularly through the social media networks, sometimes the story is not what it originally was, right? And so we've been saying it is important that we get the facts, the correct facts, scientific data. It is all available. Chinese authorities have been extremely transparent in how they have handled the coronavirus outbreak. For instance, at the very beginning, when they realized that there was a new strain of corona, they involved the WHO. The World Health Organization went into China, realized what was going on, and started the research, right? Called together some 300 scientists who then started researching what the new strain was, and so forth. So on that platform, there is a lot of information that you can gather if need be, you know, and then even step by step. Right, there have been daily updates from Chinese health authorities, daily updates from Chinese government on exactly what the government is doing to control the outbreak. And even the World Health Organization last week said this is no longer it's not a global epidemic. So there's a lot of different strategies that the Chinese government has undertaken to ensure that the outbreak is brought under control. That is the story that needs to come out, not a lot of scaremongering and so forth. Because if you look at some statistics, for instance, right, coming out of the Center for Disease Control in the US, where it talks about influenza in the US, how many people are affected every year. Between 140,000 to 810,000 are hospitalized every year because of influenza, right? So sometimes we have some people have tended to blow what is happening in China out of control, out of control, and yet there is a lot of efforts that has gone into controlling the outbreak. China built a hospital in less
a
than
matter of
in
weeks,
less than a
exactly,
week, right?
yeah.
A second hospital shortly after. 11 temporary hospitals have been set up in Wuhan alone to try and control the epidemic. So there has been a little bit of misinformation, but I think when you look at the African scenario, where the people that have been that have assisted in ensuring that there isn't so much panic have been our government officials, because when it comes to telling the people what exactly is happening in terms of the epidemic, you hear that it is the ministers of health in government. You hear that our ambassador in China has talked about it. So it is high-level officials that have responded to the outbreak, and therefore made sure that on the African continent, at least there is as little panic as possible in there.
And that information is key, isn't it? That's what's going to keep people safe at the end of the day. Well, thank you so much.